It's kind of like the continuum of care.
So, Rich, I have to ask you,
Sure.
Do you know Fred Edmonds? So he was on the podcast earlier, and I saw on your LinkedIn bio online that you two may have worked together in the marketing department at Franklin Insurance.
Yep, absolutely. Fred and I were partners in crime for many, many years at Franklin Insurance. We kind of both came up through the marketing ranks. So we would go on road trips to call on the independent agents that we served throughout the country, really. So, yeah, spent a lot of good time with Fred.
Now, for the inside question here, sneaking suspicion, were you the better golfer? Was Fred the better golfer?
No. Fred gets more time on the course than I do. I'm working too hard, but we both enjoy the game and love to golf. And coincidentally enough, many of the independent agents that we worked with were also great golfers.
Sure.
So we would spend a lot of time on the golf courses with them, and sometimes in the casino, but a lot of times working. So
maybe I should have been an independent agent.
Yeah.
And then I would have been a good golfer. I don't know. Maybe those two things go hand in hand, but my game's not quite there.
Well, you see, I have the effect on people. They like bringing me around because then they feel like Tiger Woods.
Yeah.
With my
Right.
game.
Yeah.
More oftentimes not trying to find my lost balls
Right.
and adverse in play. But that's enough golf talk. Maybe we can launch a side golf podcast. Conversation for another day. But Rich, I couldn't be happier to have you in studio with us. Not to say we couldn't do a good conversation via Zoom, but it's always nice to be able to bring guests in here, be able to go talk, chit chat, have a little bit of conversation about senior living, assisted living, all the above.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate the invitation.
Yeah.
And it's an important topic that not a lot of families know about until it's a crisis time.
Yeah.
So anything we can do to educate them and plan for the future is well worth the effort.
Yeah, so when I was introduced to you just, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was like, oh my gosh, I wish I had this guy around Christmas time. So we were dealing with this with my father right around Christmas time and sort of in the months leading up to that, right?
Sure.
And didn't know anything about obviously I know what nursing care, you've heard the terminology.
Right.
But there's so many different layers to
Absolutely.
it. So I guess to get started, if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself and about assisted living locators.
Sure. So Rich Martin, live in Bay City, father of 2 grown adult children, married to my wife Jenny for about 30 years.
Oh, great.
And I got into this business very similar to what your situation happened. My father was living by himself in a condo, going downhill physically, isolated, didn't have any outlets for socialization, driving my sister crazy, who was his primary caregiver. So he moved into a community down in Columbus, Ohio, and he made a 180-degree turnaround.
Oh.
Because he had people to talk to. He had a reason to get out of bed in the morning, and it was just really great for him. He got the medical care that he needed. So he got a great 5-6 years of good quality living that he wouldn't have had living on his own. So that was always kind of running in the back of my head, and I ran across Assisted Living Locators, which is a franchise business based out of Phoenix, Arizona. And we've got about 150 individual business owners throughout the country, and we are senior placement agents. So we work with families to find independent living, assisted living, memory care communities in the region.
Yeah, that's terrific.
So just to follow up on that, Rich, I know that sometimes those terms can kind of be thrown together and people may not know assisted living, independent living. Rich, isn't that the same thing? And so do you mind like a basic definition of what those 3 things might entail?
Sure. It's kind of like the continuum of care. So seniors, they get older, they're living at home, they're still very independent. They're responsible for all of their shopping and cooking and medication management. And then maybe it gets to a point where, they've lost a loved one, they want to move into a community. Oftentimes that looks like independent living. So it's just a 55 and older apartment. You're still responsible for all your needs. The next step is what I call a hybrid. So it's independent living, but they have care there that's available. So maybe someone just needs a little bit of help with their medication management, or they just need help getting dressed in the morning. Those services are available kind of on an a la carte basis. As their needs continue, it might make sense to move into an assisted living community.
Okay.
And there, all of your meals are taken care of. Someone does your laundry, your housekeeping. Of course, medication management is a big part of being a senior now. And any step you need along the way, they're there to help you. These are called your activities of daily living.
Okay.
So it's dressing, going to the bathroom, showering, all those kinds of things. And depending on your level of care needs, there's someone there to help you with that. Finally, there's memory care. And people with dementia or Alzheimer's, they get to a point where they're not safe at home. They're not safe in assisted living community. They need to be in a secured environment. Some people with late-stage dementia exit seek. They want to elope. They want to go back to the office or home. Some people, have behaviors. They get frustrated and agitated. So you need a dedicated staff, people that are trained to deal with folks with dementia and Alzheimer's, take care of them. So that's the continuum of care.
Okay. Yeah. No, unfortunately, I've had the opportunity to deal with a lot of what you talked about.
Sure.
With my grandfather in particular, he had, I guess back then, what we called Alzheimer's or hardening of the arteries. This was decades ago, right? But he was one of those, I guess, elopers that wanted to, if you wouldn't have him literally almost tied to a chair, he'd go out the door and end up in Carlton or something, 15 miles away.
Yeah.
So, and that's scary for family members, right? Wondering where their loved one, where they are and if they're safe, right?
Yeah.
So when you're meeting with a family and trying to help them to determine like where their loved one belongs, what kind of questions do you ask, or how do you determine what makes sense for them?
Sure. I do like a 4-step process with my families. The first is an intake interview. So we'll have a long discussion about maybe 35, 40 minutes about their loved one, their level of care, what kind of symptoms they're seeing with them being at home, or, we ask about their cognitive ability. Is it just reminders and redirections, or is it something more like that elopement that you spoke of? We'll talk about budget. We'll talk about that individual and what they did for a career, what they enjoy doing. Are they social? Are they, more, reclusive? And then we'll kind of make recommendations based on that profile.
Yeah. Okay.
So that next step for me is to recommend a number of communities that might fit that profile from a budget, location preferences, level of care needs. And then I'll usually go with that family on tours.
Okay.
So they get the information they need. They ask the questions. I represent all the communities, so I'm not pushing one over the other.
Okay.
Kind of like a realtor. When you walk into a place, you get a sense, that's home.
Okay. Yep.
And just to make certain too, I mean, this is a wide range of communities, and so you're not just representing, hey, this is the 1%. I mean, it's truly A to Z. Correct?
Absolutely. All kinds of healthcare needs, all kinds of budget constraints.
Okay.
Everybody has them. We used to retire at 65 and pass away at 73, and now folks are living well into their 80s and 90s. So that changes. That puts a lot of stress on the finances, et cetera.
Sure. Right. So back to what Will said, though. You can work with any budget, or is there a particular household that you're seeking, or?
Nope. I work with all families.
Okay.
And oftentimes, if somebody is lower income, they need help finding out about the Medicaid waiver program, what communities take that program. So I will steer them in that right direction as well.
Okay. Gotcha.
How do you recommend people even have the conversation to bring up with? Because I think for a lot of people, and we can see this whether relatives, people in the community, people we know, they feel like they're almost losing a self or part of themselves, going in and almost admitting it's not the right way of saying it. Don't get me wrong, but how do you recommend people even have the conversation to go bring up so it's not like a hostile environment?
Well, I always stay positive. I mean, that's part of the thing. One of the things we have to get over with a lot of seniors is they have a perception that you're going to put me in a nursing home, I'm going there to die. Well, if you've been to some of the newer assisted living communities in our area, you'll find out that there's activities all day long. There's gourmet meals. There's people to take care of you. So this is a total change of perception for the senior. So that's where those tours come in, where we take them out to different places to show them, hey, we've got live music today. We've got, happy hour this afternoon. We've got all kinds of things to, keep them busy.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that this isn't a permanent decision necessarily. Most communities are month to month. So if you move into a typical community, you're not happy there for one reason or the other, you can always, end your lease with a 30-day notice. And that's helpful too.
Yeah.
So it's something like you'd see in the movie Happy Gilmore.
Right. None of that stuff.
Right.
No, just making sure. And that's interesting too from the perspective of month to month, because I never thought about it from that perspective too. Because when you go think about making a change, of course, there's varying levels of degrees, but I never knew about it just from the month to month perspective, which is nice. And I think could provide people probably a lot of comfort too, because you can tell people, hey, you know what? If you don't like it, let's go try somewhere else.
Exactly. And there's also this thing called respite. So respite was originally designed to give the caregiver a break. Okay. So the caregiver is going to go on a vacation.
Sure.
Mom and dad need to go somewhere that's going to be safe for them. So now respite, a lot of seniors use that, stay in an assisted living community for a couple of weeks, and then you can go back home. You bring an overnight bag and your medication. You can kick the tires on an assisted living community to see if it's a fit for you without a long-term commitment. So,
okay. Oh, that's interesting. So someone could go for, 5 nights or 10 nights and just sort of test it out and see what
there's
it's
some
like.
restrictions on the minimum times depending on the community, but usually it's about 2 weeks to a month.
Okay.
But yeah, it gives them a good opportunity to try it out.
So from a cost perspective, I'm sure that, there's a wide range of people, right? And from all the way from, hey, I don't have a budget for this, they may believe, to like, I have a budget for it and I'm trying to find the most luxurious option available.
Sure.
So talk to us a little bit about what those options are like, what people should be aware of, and where they might find themselves.
Sure. Well, most communities charge for a room and board, and that would include your meals and your apartment and housekeeping and all of those things. And then they also add on a level of care. So they'll do an assessment of you. Level 1, typically you're very independent. You're responsible for most of your activities of daily living. Where level 5, you may be in a wheelchair or you may be bedbound, end of life, whatnot. And that price will change depending on your needs and how much care they provide for you.
Right.
Usually independent living is much cheaper, maybe $3,000 a month in a community that provides some oversight. And then memory care is the most expensive on the other end of the scale, and that could be $7,000, $7,500 a month, typically in our area. So people that don't have a lot of resources, there is the Medicaid waiver program that's available to them. And there's some limitations on the amount of money that they can make per month and a number of assets they have. But there's a number of good communities in our area that do take waiver clients in. And the waiver will pay for the care portion of your stay there, and your Social Security pension can pay for the room and board portion of it.
Okay. And so just out of curiosity, I'm sure a lot of people probably ask, how are these facilities regulated? How are they monitored for care? Because, of course, public, private, there's a good mix. Different owners have different standards of care. And so how do you think about that and screening is the wrong word, but as you think about what the right facility looks like, how do you think about that as it's put into that equation?
Sure, there's a number of factors that go into that. The state actually does a very robust job of managing and regulating the assisted living communities. There's a site out there, LARA.gov, LARA.gov, and they do all the licensing for the different types of communities in our area. They'll also track violations and complaints. So they'll do a robust investigation of a community after a complaint to see if it's valid or not. Assisted living communities are rated on everything from like a hotel would be, like a hospital would be, like a restaurant would be, because they have all those functions there. So if anybody has, a number of violations on that system, that's a red flag. Let's talk about it. What happened here? What steps did you take to prevent this from happening again? Oftentimes also I'll look at, like a medium size community with multiple locations. That way they've got systems in place for everything from food service to hiring to training. And that gives you some peace of mind that there are those controls in place where if something does go wrong, we'll find out what happened and we'll rectify the situation.
Yeah.
Adult foster care homes can be smaller residential homes, really provide personable care. They do a great job, but they don't have the robust systems that some of these other mid-sized communities would have.
Sure.
Word on the street is another thing too. Every place has a reputation. You go on Facebook and you'll hear the good, bad, and the ugly about any community.
So just to check, Yelp might not be the best determiner.
That's the last stop on your path. Call an expert. I've been to all the places and I can help navigate the waters.
So a lot of what we've talked about are like homes where someone would go, right? What about at-home care?
Sure.
Is that something you assist with as well? And
sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Again, on that continuum, people want to stay in their house as long as possible. That requires bringing services in to them. Is their house safe? Do they need ramps or grab bars? Is their shower okay? Are they getting proper nutrition? So something like a Meals on Wheels is a great resource for folks because not only do you get a nourishing meal, but you have somebody do a wellness check on you a few times a week.
Right.
And in-home care providers, there's a lot of what we call private duty in-home care providers. They come in a couple of different flavors, medical versus non-medical. And primarily, somebody needs help with cooking, with cleaning, doing some laundry, some socialization, and that's the non-medical private duty care. And that's a great resource for people. They'll usually come in a couple times a week for a few hours a day and just to check on the situation, make sure it's safe for the senior.
Yeah. I'm assuming that that's the most expensive form of care, or is that a poor assumption?
Well, the distinction there is the number of hours that you hire that service for. If they come in couple, 3 times a week, they usually have a minimum of 3 to 4 hours of visit. That can be pretty cost effective to supplement maybe some family help, some other things. But when you start talking about in-home 24/7 care, it gets to be very expensive.
Yeah.
But I think one of the benefits too that not a lot of people think about is just a social aspect, being able to go chit chat, be able to interact with people. Because there was a really good article that came out in the Wall Street Journal probably about a year or two ago that really showed the impact of loneliness.
Yes.
I mean, that's equivalent like smoking multiples of cigarettes every single day, just not having that social interaction or like the confines that people would normally be used to. It's insane.
Huge. It's a huge impact on seniors. And as they get older, seniors' world shrinks, right? A lot of their friends have passed away. They're in their condo or apartment and, they sleep in their lazy boy or those kinds of things. They don't get dressed in the morning. Improper hygiene, improper nutrition. So those can have a dramatic impact on the just trajectory of their lives, basically. If you don't have that social interaction, you're more susceptible to a fall or something like that. So that's a big part of it. Most of the communities nowadays have, 4 or 5 activities per day, usually starting off in the morning with exercise. And that could be just, drumming, cardio drumming on a chair, whatever your level is fine. Of course, we like bingo. We do movies and sports. A lot of places have live entertainment come in throughout the week. And really, it's great.
Good. Is there anything in particular, like from a technology perspective or just something that you feel like, there's a gap, like there's something that could be done differently? But I read some about like wellness centers within some of these assisted living facilities or just wearable technology, right? Where if someone falls, there's a button or say like wearable tech, like an iWatch where there's a button they can push. What types of technology are you seeing? Maybe what are you also reading about that's upcoming?
Yeah, there's a lot of that tech. It started with the Life Alert pendant. And, now a lot of communities give those out to their residents. If they need help, they can press the button. But now we're enabling that with GPS. So whether you're anywhere in the building or even if you're outside of the building, you can push that button and they'll know where you are and know where to send help. A lot of communities have, like a motion sensor in the room. It's not recording anything, but if that motion sensor doesn't come off by 10:30 in the morning, they're going to send somebody in to check on you. Also, fall detection is a big part of that. Many communities, the idea is to bring the services to the senior. So you can have PTOT, come into the community to provide physical therapy, occupational therapy to the senior there. And some have those services located right on premises. They have visiting physician services. So the guys will come in to handle medication and keep wellness checks on the residents. All kinds of things coming out. Some folks have cameras, camera phones, those kinds of things in the room for their loved ones as well.
That's very cool. And so I'm getting close. So let's go pretend a hypothetical situation. I'm coming close to the finish line. I want to go sign with an ABC facility, maybe just for a 1-month contract. What are 3 must-ask questions that you would ask?
Yeah.
Now, they could be very general, very specific, but what do you think are 3 very important areas that people should definitely not skip over?
Yeah, so, I always use, and that tour is such an important part of that process because I always recommend using all your senses, right? When you walk in, does it smell like fresh food or the alternative?
Sure.
And sometimes that happens in senior living, but those should be temporary and briefly and taken care of immediately. But, what are the people talking about? Are they talking, engaging? Is there laughter going on? Or are people, asking for help? Or the TV's blaring, those kinds of things. You look around, is the place clean? Is it seem like they're doing a good job on cleanliness and hygiene? And are the residents well kept? Are they dressed appropriately? Have they showered and those kinds of things? So a lot of it you can tell by your senses. Again, looking at some complaints and some violations or something else. Staffing is one of the biggest problems in the senior living, to be honest with you. We're through the days of COVID where it was just devastating to our industry. And now things have settled down quite a bit. But there is always some turnover in that lower kind of caregiver positions, So what are they doing to hire? Is staffing appropriate to the level of residents and the acuity of needs of that resident base? So staffing is another big one. The other piece is communication. Who do you talk to if there's an issue, or what happens if mom, has a fall there at the community? Who are you going to call? Those kinds of things. Communication is so important.
Yeah. So some listeners or viewers are probably asking themselves right now, when do I call Rich, or am I qualified to call him? Right?
Sure.
Is it all for low income? Is it all for high income? Is it everything? So how would you answer that question? Who should be in contact with you, and when should they be in contact?
Yeah, I think the main thing is to have a plan, to whether, when a crisis happens, mom or dad have a fall, they're in the hospital, they're going to discharge them in a couple of days. You want to be able to, at that time, be able to respond and say, hey, I know about these 4 or 5 communities in my town. And these are the ones that are on top of my list. Let's call Rich to see if there's a wait list and whatnot. The other thing is there's no cost to my service. It's a free service to the families. So I'm able to help just about anybody at any time.
Okay.
But you get the warning signs of your parents if you're taking care of them. Maybe you don't see them all the time, but when you go there, their house isn't kept up. They're showing signs of not hygiene. They're being forgetful. Maybe they're still driving, and that could be a problem.
Yeah.
They're a fall risk. So many times, falls can just have a devastating impact on seniors. So if you see any of those red flags, you're worried about mom or dad not being safe at home, that's a good time to call.
Yeah. Okay, great.
And Rich, one more question to ask before, and we can ask seniors your question, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
No. So before we get there, one last question I have to ask. And so as you were thinking about taking this role, how important was it for you to find a role that you can counteract with people, consult with people, but have a no-fee service to the actual end client? Because I think that's so special, because for you're truly not biased. You're truly like not just trying to go funnel people here, and here, like I'm sure some other roles could have offered you. And so we forgot to ask that question earlier on, but for you, how important was that for you?
I've worked, as we talked about at the beginning of the show, for corporate America for about 35 years. And this is an opportunity, honestly, for me to give back to families rather than chasing the quarterly numbers or whatever next hurdle we got to accomplish.
Sure.
I'm able to have these meaningful conversations with families and honestly talk them off the ledge, put together a plan with them to help them and their family, regardless of the family dynamics, or there's always family issues or something like that we can overcome together by putting a plan in place and making that, giving them the information they need to make a good decision. So it was very important for me. And this just kind of clicked from my experience with my father and what I've seen so many families go through. Like you mentioned at the top, I wish I would have heard about your business 3 years ago because you went through the same experience, and so many people in our kind of sandwich generation have done that.
Yeah.
So it's been a blessing, to be honest with you. I'm really happy to help families and just kind of walk them through this space.
Yeah. No, personally, like I said in the beginning, we would have really benefited. Of course, we had to sort of fumble through it and figure it out on our own. And having someone like you that we could have reached out to help would have been priceless, would have been really helpful. And so hopefully the listeners and viewers, we need to share your information with everyone so that they can contact you and make sure that they understand you are here in the Great Lakes Bay region.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe you can share a little bit about the counties or the area that you cover.
Sure. I'm based out of Bay City, but work the majority of my time in Midland, Saginaw, and Bay City communities. Well, I will go out to the Clare, Sanford, West Branch, surrounding areas, and steer them into communities that might be a fit for them in their local area. It's funny in Bay City, we have a river that goes through town. So people on the east side only want to stay in communities on the east side. People on the west side only want to stay on the west side of Bay City, which is kind of amusing because they're only 5 minutes apart. Yeah. But, there's good care homes on both sides of the river. Yeah. It's about being local.
Sure.
There are about 120 senior living communities in the Great Lakes Bay region. Wow. So if you were to be tasked with finding the best fit for your family,
so tough.
It'd be very difficult and be a lot of legwork and that kind of thing. So I'm able to kind of cut through the wheat and the chaff there and help families focus on what might be their best option.
Yeah. Great.
And it's a personal decision too.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that this is a good fit and they don't have a poor experience and are back in the market in 6 months.
Right. Is that something that you help with? Like, say someone goes to ABC home or whatnot, and they're just not enjoying it. They come back to you, and you can help to get them placed appropriately.
Absolutely. That's why I follow up with my families, after placement to make sure it's going well. A lot of times I can act as an intermediary between the family and the community.
Sure.
Because, again, it's that communication piece. Sure. What's gone wrong? Well, how can we fix it? Is it salvageable? Moving, as we all know, is very traumatic for whether you're young or old. Yeah. So you want to avoid that as much as possible. Right. And, maybe if finances is a concern and people are worried about running out of money, let's find a place that takes the waiver. So when we're at that point, we can turn on that switch and stay there without having to move again.
Good.
No, thank you for mentioning that. I thought that just from the no fee perspective, but then also just all the other information, I want to make sure that the listeners and viewers, hey, this is a very, very important part and why we wanted to ask you to go come on. And so couldn't be happier, but now shifting to our most fun question.
Yeah, Michigan State.
I think we're all agreeing.
You had daughters that went to both, though, right? You had one at State, one at Michigan. But you're a State fan.
Yes.
Okay.
I was just going to ask, how do you choose, where do you pledge your allegiance to, one or the other? Do you almost wear like a 50-50 shirt?
Yeah, my wife went to Michigan State. That's where we met. My youngest daughter went to State. So, the house is green. We got one person who's an outliner, but
maybe it's a small little smidge of blue. But unrelated to that, so Kevin and I always like to go chat what we're currently watching from a TV show or movie perspective. So out of curiosity, what have you been watching from a TV or a movie perspective? Hopefully not too much of a gotcha question, but
sure. No, I'm kind of forced into reality TV with my wife.
Okay.
So we watch a lot of a Survivor and Top Chef and some of these series that have been around for a long time that we kind of grew up with and our kids kind of grew up watching. She's into a little bit more of the housewife things that I can't stand, watching women fight.
Yeah.
So I'll step back from that show. But there's a number of series that are on. We watch from time to time. But I don't have a lot of patience for that. So
Yeah. Right.
No, can certainly understand. Yeah, I guess
how about you? Any good recommendations?
So I tend to steer away from reality TV show for some of the same things that you were mentioning, but at least for myself, I just got done watching Landman on Paramount Plus, and so Billy Bob Thornton down in Texas, and so him and a very good eclectic group of cast members. It's all about Texas oil.
Yeah, sure.
Makes me want to go buy a cowboy hat.
Yeah, right.
I probably don't need one. Yeah. How about you, Kevin?
Right now, I can't think of anything other than March Madness.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm not even a huge basketball or college basketball fan. In particular, you mentioned Michigan State. There's a probability, a pretty decent probability, that Michigan State will end up facing
Friday.
off here
They both play
relatively
Friday.
soon, right? So that would be really cool. Personally, I'm primarily a Michigan. I lean Michigan.
Yeah.
My dad was a Michigan State grad.
Okay.
Mom was a Michigan grad.
Okay.
When it comes to football, I would say I'm more of a Michigan fan. When it comes to basketball, if they're playing each other, I'd probably root for Michigan. But either way, I'd love to see either team advance and go all the way.
Yeah, that would be ideal. I tell you, the games have been so close this year, just down to the wire.
Yep.
Last second shot wins it. So it's been a lot of fun to watch the tournament.
Really cool. Particularly the upsets, right? And you got to root for the underdog. The McNeese who beats Clemson or whatnot.
And destroys everybody's bracket, right?
Right, exactly. You're immediately like, okay, I lost.
Yeah.
Right. So
Just kind of throw it out at that point.
yeah, good. Well, thanks so much for joining us today.
Appreciate you guys having me.
We really
on. This was
appreciate your
wonderful.
time
Good
and
conversation.
what you provide is really important, and so really excited to get that out there to the viewers and listeners so that they can contact you when they do have a need.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation, guys. And absolutely, even if you have a question or you're in the market for in-home care or an elder law attorney, or I try to be a focal point for my families to get them the help that they need, whether it be senior living or not. So well, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Well, perfect. Thank you so much for coming on, and thank you everyone for listening to another great episode of Mitten Money.